Welcome to It's the Economy, a very important discussion lined up for you. The Ministry of Statistics has just launched a services version of IIP. IIP, we are all familiar. It is the monthly index of industrial production. But this gives an idea of only the factory output. MoSPI, that is the Ministry of Statistics, has now launched the ISP to measure the growth of services sectors like trade, banking, insurance, real estate, etc. Now, it's important to note that MoSPI has not released one overall services growth number, like it gives you one IIP number. It gives us the growth of 19 separate sectors, which are services sectors, for April 2026. Now, MoSPI says that 14 out of the 19 sectors recorded double-digit growth in April, and some like retail, trade and accommodation, housing, all grew by over 30%. To understand more about the data, I have with me Dr. Saurabh Garg, Secretary of the Ministry of Statistics. Good morning, Dr. Garg. Thank you very much for your time. And first, of course, many congratulations to you and your ministry for the excellent work that you have been doing in increasing the data sources. But let me come to the services data, which came day before yesterday. This April data, for instance, retail trade 30.8% higher, accommodation, food 37% higher, real estate 27.7%. I mean, these numbers are very big. GDP is not growing so much. Even corporate earnings are not growing so much. Why are these numbers so high?
First of all, thank you for having me. And let me clarify that there is a difference between this services index and the GDP numbers. And I think that's very important to have that difference. The GDP represents the value add, the difference between whatever are the input costs and the output prices and what's the value add. The services production, just like the industrial index for industrial production, is a measure of the output volumes. It indicates what has been the change in the volume and without any reference to the value add. So that's one important difference we must keep in mind. The second is that the data sources that we use for the index for services production are based on real data. Unlike some of the others which are survey-based, a majority of the data sources for the services production comes from the underlying GST returns that are filed and the GST collections that are done. But obviously, let me hasten to add, we only have access to aggregate data. We do not have access to unit level data. So I think that should be very clear to everyone that we have access to only aggregate data. Okay. So that's one. And we have administrative data, for example, for railways, airlines. We know actually the number of passenger kilometers sold in that month or other such data. So the data that we have is hard data, is data where firms have actually put in that kind of funds and given in the GST returns. Now, why the difference? A couple of areas I would just like to mention. Number one, if you look at the growth rates, for example, on the manufacturing side of automobiles, of cement, of steel, they have been in double digits. It's not that many of the underlying manufacturing base figures are very different. Services obviously are much more differentiated, and therefore the margins would vary from depend on the differentiation of services that is there. And even if you look at the export services, I was just looking at that data, which has just come out for the previous month. Services exports have been over 20% growth. So the data that is shown by the services production data, I won't say that it is very much out of line from the underlying data and what are some of the collateral figures available.
Okay. So, well, first, let me get this right. What you're saying is the services ISP, your services index, looks at, say, shall I say, revenue or top line, whereas GDP, looks at EBITDA. Is that a good way to understand?
Yes, at a very broad level, I would say there would be some changes, but yes, at a broad level, that is fair enough to say that.
Okay. So, but even assuming what you're saying, I take your point on banking. For instance, it is 12%. I would assume that banking NII has grown at 12%, or advances or loans have grown at 12%. That makes sense. But accommodation and food, 37% looks very big, and along with it, real estate 27.7. Actually, we just got the real estate data for 1H from companies like Knight Frank, etc. It's very mild. It's like 1%, 4%. Number of dwellings sold is what they have. So it still looks. I mean, what is growing at 27-30% in India is a question we want to ask ourselves.
Yes, that's a fair question. And I suppose we were looking at the last year's growth rates also of the services, which we have also published for
Yes.
FY26. It's there. It's there on the board.
Yeah.
And if you look at the large number, they are in similar areas. There could be a difference in some sectors.
Okay.
But I think there's one other important factor that we need to keep in view, that the GST returns are filed not only by corporates, large corporates, but also by all entities which are above the threshold of 20 lakhs or 40 lakhs. And that may not necessarily only be companies. There could be other entities registered under acts.
Okay.
And the second thing I would like to highlight is that some of the top line data that we get on a high frequency is perhaps limited to certain larger urban areas, certain larger companies, and the penetration of that across India in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities and towns might be limited. So there could be differences of growth across the different geographical areas, across different slices of the economy that are being and who are they being served by. Okay. So I think as we move into from month to month, in fact, the next month's data, that is, we released April. For May data, we'll just be releasing within the next 10 to 12 days on the 29th. I think once we have a set of data for a few months, a lot of these kind of issues will get resolved.
Fair point, sir. It is just that I went back now when you were speaking. I Googled the March, April GST collections itself. Since you say the source is basically GST. In March, the GST collections was 8.8% higher. In April, it grew by 8.7%. So even then, some of these elements like 27, 30, 37 are looking out of sync. So I want to know if you're planning any tweaks, and if you are at some point planning an overall ISP number like we have an IIP number.
Yes, that is the idea. At the moment, the ISP covers about 60% of the services.
Okay.
Services are about 55% of the economy. And what we have released now covers about 60% of the 55%. So somewhere around slightly more than 30% of the overall economy. And perhaps some of the larger numbers that you are mentioning, for example, food, accommodation, the overall weight would be in single digits, obviously. Okay. So to that extent, when you look at the overall figures, there would be sync in what the GST numbers that you spoke about.
Fair enough.
We would bring out an overall number. We just want to give it a few months also for the system to stabilize, for us to see what are the changes. And we have the weights available from the annual survey of the service sector industries, and we have the national accounts weights. Keeping that in view, we hope to bring out a single number. Okay. Simultaneously, we are also looking at how to add on 2 or 3 sectors of the services. Health is not there as of now. Education is not there as of now. And another big chunk is ownership of dwellings, self-ownership of dwellings. These 3 sectors itself would raise the coverage to more than 80%. So we are working on this, and let's hope that within a few months we will be able to bring out a single number.
Yeah, so much of this is in the non-formal sector. So I can imagine, especially ownership of dwellings, it would take time. Okay, so by when do you think you will be able to use the ISP data to calculate the GVA?
Let me put it in two parts. One is at the annual level when we bring out the GDP. A lot of the data anyway gets incorporated because we have a large number of sources for the annual GDP estimates, and the services sector fully gets covered. It's in the quarterly estimates, which are based on indicators, where really the index for services production will help, because in the quarterly estimates, now we will be able to incorporate the services sector to a much greater extent to the fact that we have these high frequency indicators. So I will not commit that we will have it in the first quarter of this year. We hope to bring out those numbers by the end of August, but we will try. But definitely, I assume from the second quarter onwards, we'll definitely have it.
Okay. Sir, let me now bring out some, people actually messaging me with questions. One question that comes from everyone is, when will you give us the back series for GDP in particular? In fact, for CPI, everything, others as well, where you have given us a new base year. The past GDP is needed to know where we are in the business cycle. So when do we get it?
Yeah. So two things. One, let me reiterate that we have the past numbers for the last 4 years.
Yes.
From 22, 23 onwards.
Yes.
So for comparison purposes, we have last 4 years data,
Yes.
both whether you look at the CPI or the GDP. As far as CPI is concerned, we have given the linking factor
Yes.
for the previous index. And you must note that in the current CPI, we have increased the granularity to a great extent. Earlier, at the second level, apart from the headline number, we were only giving it the data in 6 groups. Now we give it in 12 divisions, and further on into the subgroups.
No, I will come with
the new.
Yeah, I take your point, sir, but this gentleman who's messaging me, I think, wants GDP. He's saying the absence of a long cycle GDP, comparable GDP, makes you unable to know where you are in the business cycle.
Sure. So we've mentioned it at the time of the GDP release also, that we will release the back numbers by the end of the year. It will take us that much time.
Sure.
But we hope to provide more color, more data in the next few months itself. But by the end of the year, we hope to bring out the entire back series as per the international norms.
Fair point. Thank you. Thank you for that, sir. I think that's most awaited. And the other thing, you spoke about granularity, and I must thank your ministry in terms of granularity, also in the unincorporated sector or informal sector, both services and manufacturing. You all have done a lot of granular work. But one thing that all of us lack, my pet peeve, is Capex. You gave us one standalone, investment intention survey. That's not that helpful. We need a cycle. We need a comparable annual series. And what you give us by way of that, the investment number in GVA, by the time you give us the granular data, it is 24 or 36 months later, 2 years later. Can you all give us a regular Capex index?
Yes. In fact, after the first round, which we did in 24, the second round of 25, we released a few months back in March or April this year. And this would be a regular annual survey of Capex intentions. And in fact, the second survey, when we released it I think April is when we released it, it showed that what the people or corporates mentioned as their intentions for investment in the year 25-26, the actual realization was 96%, which is great. So this is an annual survey. We will be bringing out annually. And on the more bringing out the gross fixed capital formation figures more frequently, since you have flagged it, let me see internally with the team what best we can do on that.
Oh, that will be most helpful. And even this information you're giving us, that investment intention will be released on an annual basis is most helpful. But a breakup of that fixed GFCF, gross fixed capital formation, that will be really helpful. So finally, you're giving PPI. I mean, you're not giving. The Commerce Ministry is giving both WPI and PPI numbers, Producer Price Index. When will you start using the PPI to calculate the GVA or GDP itself, to deflate the GDP? When the August 29 numbers come, August 29, you're going to give us the first quarter numbers. Will you be using PPI?
So let me say on the PPI, you might have noticed that in the IIP, we have already introduced it for those components which were value-based to deflate them and get the volume numbers. So when we released it, the IIP last month, earlier this month, we have already incorporated the PPI. On the GDP, the work is going on. We are hopeful that when we release it in August end, we should be able to do it. The only reason I'm not committing, because there's a lot of background work required, but that is our intention, that we hope to include the PPI in the August numbers. Just in case we are not able to do it by that time, it will definitely get introduced by the second quarter. But I'm hopeful for the first quarter.
Okay, that's good to hear, sir. I can imagine it's a lot of work, because even comparable numbers will have to be deflated with the PPI.
Yes.
There is work to do. Thank you very much, Dr. Garg. Pleasure having you with us, and for the wealth of information you're giving us as to what we should expect from the MoSPI. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here.